Pain is coming for you. Not maybe, not someday. It is already on its way. The ache in your body, the fear in your chest, the moment life presses down and asks a single question: will you break? Most people break. They collapse the second things get uncomfortable, and they spend the rest of their lives calling that collapse a personality. But 2,000 years ago, one man refused. They exiled him to a barren rock in the middle of the sea. They put him in chains. They forced him to dig ditches under a burning sun until his hands bled. And he did something that made his captors afraid of him. He smiled. How does a man in chains become freer than the men holding the whip? That question has an answer, and by the end of this, you will never look at your own pain the same way again. His name was Musonius Rufus, and he was, without exaggeration, the toughest Stoic who ever lived. Rome in the 1st century after Christ was not a safe place to speak the truth. The Emperor Nero sat on the throne, paranoid, violent, drunk on his own power. And into that court walked a teacher who would not flatter anyone. Musonius told the truth about virtue, about weakness, about what it meant to be a man of character. And powerful men do not like being told they are weak. So Nero did what tyrants do. He removed him. Musonius was banished to Gyros, a tiny waterless island in the Aegean Sea, a place so brutal that Romans used its name the way we use the word prison. No shade, no fresh water, nothing but rock, salt, and heat. They expected him to die there, or worse, to beg. But here is what almost no one realizes about that island. While other exiles wasted away in despair, Musonius did something strange. He explored it. He searched the cracked ground until he found a hidden spring of fresh water, and in finding it, he saved not only himself, but the other prisoners abandoned there with him. He turned a death sentence into a small society. He taught philosophy on the rocks. The island meant to erase him became his classroom, and this is where his real teaching begins, because Musonius did not believe suffering was something to survive. He believed it was something to use. He said a thing that sounds almost insane to modern ears. He said that we should not pray to avoid hardship. We should train for it, on purpose, the way an athlete trains for the arena. Most of his students hated hearing this. They wanted comfort dressed up as wisdom. They wanted a philosophy that made the pain go away. He offered them the opposite, and what he offered was a code, 3 steps that could take any human being, no matter how soft, and forge them into someone that hardship could not touch. But before he would teach even the first step, he made them face a truth that stopped them cold. He told them the reason they suffered so much was not the pain itself. It was something they were doing to the pain every single time without knowing it. And you are almost certainly doing it right now. Think about the last time something hurt. Not the huge tragedies, the small ones. The morning the alarm went off and your whole body refused to move. The cold you had to step into. The workout you skipped. The hard conversation you rehearsed 100 times and never had. The message you were terrified to send, so it sat in your drafts, rotting. Here is what Musonius saw. In every one of those moments, the pain arrived first, but the suffering came second. And the suffering came from you, from the story you told yourself about the pain. This is unbearable. This isn't fair. I can't. That voice, he taught, is the real enemy. Not the cold water, not the heavy weight, not the fear. The commentary. Most people spend their whole lives obeying that voice. They think the voice is them. Musonius taught the first step of his code precisely to break its grip. He called it, in his own way, the practice of voluntary hardship. And it is stunningly simple. You choose discomfort before life forces it on you. You take the cold shower. You skip the second helping. You sleep on the harder bed. You walk when you could ride. Small, deliberate doses of difficulty, swallowed on purpose. Why? Because he understood something science would not confirm for nearly 2,000 years. When you voluntarily endure discomfort, you are not punishing your body. You are educating your nervous system. You are teaching it in advance that pain is not an emergency, that you can feel the wave of resistance rise and act anyway. The Stoics had a name for the goal of this training. They wanted to be able to feel the flinch and not be ruled by it. And this is where it gets strange, because the man who trains this way does not become numb. He becomes the opposite. He becomes fully awake in the exact moment that everyone else shuts down. But voluntary hardship alone is not enough. Musonius knew a man could take cold showers every morning and still crumble the day real catastrophe arrived. So the first step only prepared the ground. The second step is where the transformation truly happens, and it is the one almost nobody has the stomach for. Imagine you are one of his students. You have trained, you have endured the small discomforts, you feel strong, and then Musonius looks at you and asks a question that ruins your confidence in a single breath. He asks, what exactly is the worst that could happen to you? Most people run from that question their entire lives. They keep the fear vague, shadowy, enormous, because a vague fear can never be examined, and so it can never be defeated. It just sits in the dark and grows. Musonius forced his students to walk straight toward it. This is the second step. Not distraction, not positive thinking, the deliberate, unflinching rehearsal of the worst. He would have them sit with it. Lose the money, then what? You would eat simpler food, you would still see the sky. Lose the status, then what? The people who only loved your status were never yours to begin with. Face the pain of the body, then what? Even here, he said, the mind remains free. They can chain the legs. They cannot chain the choice of who you will be while chained. Remember, this was not theory for him. He said these words as a man who had already been exiled once, and here is the part of his life that proves he meant every syllable. He was recalled from that first exile, and then, years later, banished a second time, twice, torn from his home, his students, his comfort, not once but twice. And both times he did the same impossible thing. He treated the catastrophe as though he had already lived it in his mind 1,000 times before, because he had. That is the secret power of the second step. When you have rehearsed the worst in the safety of your own mind, it loses its ambush. It can no longer take you by surprise, and a fear that cannot surprise you is a fear that cannot control you. Stop and feel how backward this is from everything you have been taught. You have been told to think positive, to not dwell on the dark, to keep your eyes on the bright side, and so, when the dark actually comes, it hits you like a truck you never saw coming. Musonius would tell you the truth. The man who has calmly stared at the worst is the only man who can walk through it standing up. Modern psychologists stumbled onto the very same thing. They found that people who mentally confront and accept worst-case outcomes feel less anxiety, not more. That naming a fear in plain language literally quiets the alarm center of the brain. That exposure, controlled, deliberate contact with what scares us is the single most reliable way ever discovered to dissolve fear. Musonius had no brain scans. He had something better. He had the courage to test it on his own life. Which brings us to the third and final step of his code, the one that turns endurance into something almost unstoppable. Because you can train your body, you can rehearse your fears. But Musonius knew that discipline without direction is just suffering for its own sake. The third step gives the pain a purpose. He taught that every hardship is a piece of raw material, and virtue is what you build from it. He put it in words that cut straight to the bone. He said that the difficult things are precisely the things placed in front of us, so that we may show what we are made of. The insult is your chance to practice patience. The loss is your chance to practice courage. The pain is your chance to practice endurance. Without the hardship, the virtue is only a word. The hardship is what turns the word into a fact. So when the chains went on, Musonius did not ask, "Why me?" He asked a completely different question. He asked, "What can I become here that I could not become anywhere else?" And now, finally, we can answer the question we started with. How does a man in chains become freer than the men holding the whip? Because the men with the whip were slaves to their comfort. They needed everything to go their way. One reversal, one loss, one bad day, and they would shatter. But Musonius had already given up needing the world to be soft. He had trained his body to accept discomfort. He had rehearsed the worst until it lost its teeth. And he had learned to see every single hardship as fuel. There was nothing left to threaten. You cannot break a man who has already made peace with breaking. So here is what to do tonight. Not someday, tonight. Take the 3 steps and make them real. First, choose one small hardship on purpose. Turn the water cold for the last 30 seconds. Sit with the hunger a little longer, something tiny that your comfort wants to refuse. Second, take the fear that has been circling your mind and write down, in plain words, the worst that could actually happen, and then write what you would do next. Watch it shrink on the page. And third, the next time something goes wrong tomorrow, ask the Musonius question. Not why is this happening to me, but what virtue is this asking me to practice? That is the whole code. Endure on purpose. Rehearse the worst. Use everything. Pain is coming for you. That was always true, but now you know the secret the toughest Stoic who ever lived carried on to a barren rock in the middle of the sea. The pain was never the enemy. Being unprepared for it was. And you are not unprepared anymore. So the next time life presses down and asks whether you will break, you already know your answer. If this reached something in you, stay close. There is more of this ancient strength waiting, and the next one goes even deeper. Subscribe and let's walk the rest of the way together.